Hi there. Hi. What's up, witches? I normally make a point of not apologizing for things on this video that are kind of out of my control, like video quality, but for once I will apologize for the potato quality of this video because I'm having to film it on my laptop since today I want to sit down and go over with you my deep dive of The Shadow Rising, which is the fourth book in the Wheel of Time series, and I believe the one that season 3 of the Wheel of Time TV show is going to primarily be based on. And for that, I need the Kindle app in my phone because I've highlighted a lot of things throughout the novel, either plot points or bits of dialogue that I think would fit really well into the TV show or would play really well on TV or would just like to see portrayed on the TV show. So get a beverage and get comfortable because this is going to be a long one. So the first chapter of The Shadow Rising opens with Min, of all people, as the POV character. And I think this would make a really good, cold open or early episode for the show to reintroduce us both to Min as a character and reincorporate her in the main storyline of the show. And then also to, reintroduce us, the viewer as a whole, to, the Tar Valon location and plot. Because here, Min is returning as an undercover messenger for Moraine to let Swan know that Rand is kind of off his leash again and on his way to the Stone of Tear to grab Callandor, i.e., he's just left on his own again and is doing whatever he wants. And in this case, it's because he heard about the Callandor prophecy and wants to go fulfill it now so that he can cement his position as the Dragon Reborn. So after their one-on-one secret meeting, Swan ends up keeping Min around in the tower as kind of an undercover agent to help her flush out other members of the Black Aja. Liandrin in the show at this point, she's not on the run yet. She hasn't been fully outed as Black Aja. At this point in the novels, the Black Aja, some of them have been outed, including Liandrin, and they end up stealing a bunch of ter'angreal from the White Tower and going on the run. And so Swan, at least, and whoever is in the know in the tower, know about the Black Aja and that some of the sisters in the tower were members and a handful of them have now fled the tower after being exposed. But in the novels, but in the show at this point, I don't think anyone has actually been publicly exposed as Black Aja. People have their suspicions about Liandrin, but no one's been outed yet. So I could also see this being a good pretense to have Min stick around as a character, and like I said, just incorporate her into the main plot line for this season by still having her stick around to help flush out members of the Black Aja, especially if Liandrin is still around. Min was kind of working for Liandrin as a way to try to get rid of her, weird foretelling ability. I think thereby, with what happened last season, in season 2, knew that Liandrin was kind of working with the Dark One, or, the Dark One, Ishamael. So it would be interesting if Min does go back to the tower, either because she doesn't know that Ishamael or the Dark One is dead. Her pretense in the novels for staying in the tower is that she's just this rich, airheaded noblewoman who can't decide between two really angry suitors, and so she's just there seeking sanctuary from them, and has to play this ditzy character who is not at all like her real self. But that's how she's able to kind of hide in plain sight in the tower. Even if they don't end up going with all of that, it would be interesting if she does reappear at the White Tower, especially because while she's there, she is having a lot of visions of sisters in the tower and warders in the tower being bloodied or dying, and so she's getting all these omens and these signs of the coming attack on the White Tower and with the Tower Coup. So I definitely think that that's something that we're going to see play out in season 3. And I am curious how they are going to introduce Elaine's brothers. If maybe it's just going to be another cold open in Caemlyn like I've been predicting, where we're going to be introduced to them, Queen Morghese and Elaida. Or if it might be a separate thing where we already see Elaida and her brothers at the tower, because as far as they know, Elaine is missing and presumed kidnapped by either Seanchan or White Cloaks. And in the novels, this ends up being a really big point of contention between Siuan as the Amyrlin seat and Elaine's twin brother Gawyn, because he's supposed to be Elaine's protector. That's his sole purpose in life that he's been raised for, is to look out for her. And now she's missing. And he's at the tower, he has spoken to Siuan, but they're just getting this really suspicious story that oh, she ran away and now they know where she is, but her and the other girls are just on a farm somewhere doing penance as punishment. And so that's why no one can see or talk to them right now. Wink wink. But Gawyn kind of knows that Siuan is lying and that something is up and that she's not being truthful about Elaine's whereabouts, and so it really leads to a lot of distrust between them and kind of ends up pitting Gawyn against her from the beginning, sadly. So I'm curious to see how he'll be introduced and how all of that will come into play in season 3. And some interesting points of conversation between Siuan and Min that I wanted to point out and make note of are that I was giving the show a lot of flack last season for Siuan's sudden turnabout when it came to Moiraine and Rand and wanting to keep him on a leash and keep him basically as a prisoner in the tower until the last battle. And that that didn't really align with what I thought of Siuan and how she was seeing things. But in this conversation that she has with Min, Siuan does say that she thinks that they need to control Rand in order to keep him safe until the last battle, because if he dies before then, they're all screwed. The entire world is screwed at that point. The Dark One wins. But there's an interesting conversation here between Siuan and Min about Rand and the prophecies. And I think this is especially interesting given what we saw play out at the end of last season, where Moiraine basically made it a self-fulfilling prophecy that Rand was proclaimed the dragon by being the one to throw the flaming dragon banner in the sky and proclaim him to the world. Because here it's Siuan is complaining that she wishes that Rand had never heard any of the prophecies of the dragon, and Min asks why, because doesn't he have to fulfill the prophecies? And Siuan makes an interesting point in saying that the prophecies are not what makes him the dragon reborn. Prophecies are only meant to announce to the world who he is, to prepare him for what is coming, to prepare the world for it. If Moiraine can keep some control over him, she will guide him to the prophecies that we can be sure of when he's ready to face them. Here, a large chunk of the beginning of the Shadow Rising is taking place in the Stone of Tear, in the aftermath of Rand and the Aiel taking the Stone of Tear and fulfilling one of the prophecies. But that's not something that they wanted him to go do right away. He just decided to go do it on his own. With what we already know of Season 3 in the TV show, it doesn't look like they are going to be doing the Stone of Tear this season. So they're going to be skipping straight to the Waste and Rhuidean, and Rand fulfilling the Aiel prophecies of him being the Karakarn, or their chief of chiefs. So I think we're going to skip Stone of Tear and have Rand come back for Callandor after he's already won the Aiel over to his side, because that way they can be the army that he needs to go do the things he needs to do in Greater Randland as the dragon. So then we get a scene here which would be, I think I wouldn't be surprised if we also see play out in the show at some point, where we cut away to Bornhald, who we were introduced to last season, and then introduced to the storyline of his vendetta against Perrin in particular. So we here see Bornhald, of all people, convincing Aemon Valda, who was up until this point the really like villainous zealot one in the show, to let him be the one to command a mission to the Two Rivers, specifically to just get revenge on Perrin, but also, allegedly to draw out Rand as the Dragon Reborn, because they know that he's supposed to be from there. You might be asking, well, how would the White Cloaks know that Rand is supposed to be from the Two Rivers when they don't really know who Rand as a person is yet? In this scene in the novels, we see that the White Cloaks, specifically Valda and Bornhald, are now teaming up with Haddon Fane, who is going by the name Ordeith, who, much like the character of Grima in The Lord of the Rings and like the Two Towers, in the Old Tongue here means wormwood, or, worm tongue, basically. So he is acting as like a spy for the White Cloaks now, and I wouldn't be surprised if, since he knows all of the Emmonsfielders, if he is the one who tells the White Cloaks this information and prods Bornhald to go to the Two Rivers to do this. Then we actually get a scene where we cut to Lady Suroth of the Seanchan of all people. So I'll be curious to see if we do keep her as a character featured in this show. In the novels, it's been like a time jump of about 6 months from when we would have last seen her in the show, because we're kind of skipping over the Dragon Reborn novel. Here we meet up again with Suroth and see that indeed she is still alive, which in the show we did kind of see a scene where, like, we saw her ass get just blown off of the boat in episode 8 when Moiraine was attacking them. So she was kind of thrown clear of everything and could have survived if they choose to keep her. So she's just somewhere on an island in the ocean off the coast of Randland, trying to scrape together the remnants of the Seanchan forces after what went down at Falme, and keep her position as leader of the Highlena, or the Forerunners, to retake the land. And so, much like the character of Aemon Valda last season, I think that High Lady Suroth was a well-played character in that she was a very much love-to-hate character in her own way. And we also see in this scene in the books that she still has Rima Sedai, the Yellow Sister who we saw get taken captive when Nynaeve was there last season, is still her captive as a Damane. So I would not be surprised if we did see that in season 3, because the Seanchan are not going anywhere. They have lost the battle, but not the war. And so we can see her, in a scene sometime in season 3 trying to do this, basically maintain her position, scrape together the forces, and try to go retake some land, and maybe see the impact on Rima Sedai still being held captive. So, like I said, in the novels, after this, we spend a lot of time with the Emmonsfielders and the main cast in the Stone of Tyr, after Rand has taken the mythical sword Kalendor, which is very much supposed to be like Excalibur from Arthurian legend. But I wouldn't be surprised if we moved that storyline to season 4, or just move it to later, because once he takes Kalendor, it's not really a big factor in the books until the very end. He doesn't need it again until the last battle. Taking the Stone of Tyr and taking the Sword in the Stone is just kind of another prophecy to prove to the world, like Swan said, that he's the dragon. But it doesn't really matter for whether or not Rand believes it himself. But we do see that, at this point, since we've skipped The Dragon Reborn, that's the book where Perrin meets his future wifey, Faile. And we do know that her casting has been confirmed in the show. So I'm definitely interested to see how they're going to introduce her as a character in the show, because we've skipped all of that plot line in the novels. She was a hunter for the Horn of Valyr, but we've already seen that storyline be played out. Now, whether or not the public knows that the horn was found and used at that battle in Falme remains to be seen, so that made-up story that we saw in Kyrian, where they were trying to, like, really hype up the hunt for the horn as a way of, like, getting people to go on this wild goose chase. That could still be something that we see and that stays as her character background at first. She is kind of a very savvy character. She knows a lot of things and can be, very smart and streetwise in her own way. So perhaps if she was in Falma and saw everything play out there, she might have, like, seen Perrin then and, like, latched onto him as a prominent figure in this big battle that was going on. And so maybe, like, she decides to stick close to them after that, whether he likes it or not, because that is kind of how they start their relationship in the novels, is she's basically like, I'm staying here and I'm staying close to you and you can't get rid of me whether you like it or not. I'm definitely curious to see how Faile is going to be introduced in the show, because her casting has been confirmed and she does become a very important person to Perrin throughout the rest of the series. I wouldn't be surprised if, since we have Perrin being the one to be introduced to Aviendha as a character first, if he is the one who also introduces Rand to the Aiel, they can kind of be his in with the other Aiel. With what happened at the end of season 2, Aviendha and Bane and Chiad were there to see Rand become proclaimed the dragon, and that doesn't necessarily mean automatically that he is their chief of chiefs, but it does tie into a lot of the signs that they're looking for of their kind of messiah figure, he who comes with the dawn. I would also be really excited and happy if we finally, as our season 3 flashback to the Age of Legends, finally get the scene of how Lews Therin became known as Lews Therin Kinslayer, because that's Rand's big conflict that we kind of saw a little bit of in season 2, and then becomes one of his major character conflicts and character arcs throughout the rest of the novels, is his angst over not just being the Dragon Reborn, but being the reincarnated soul of Lews Therin Telamon, who is known as Lews Therin Kinslayer, because when he went crazy and started the breaking, he went mad and accidentally killed his whole family and everyone he loved. And that's why Rand is really fixated on that point as a man who can channel. He doesn't want to be that person who goes mad like Lews Therin and kills the people closest to him. So I really hope that at some point we do get a cold open of this scene between him and Ishamael, especially now that we did get introduced to Ishamael as a character and a Forsaken, and get those little hints that him and Lews Therin knew each other. And not only that, we're kind of close in the Age of Legends. That scene of Lews Therin going mad and, realizing what he's done is the first scene in the first novel of the series. It's the opening scene of Eye in the World, and we haven't gotten it in the show yet. So now that we are have wrapped up Ishii as a character, I really hope we get now a kind of flashback scene of the origin of Lews Therin Kinslayer. We also know that Tom as a character is confirmed to return in season 3. In the novels, I think he meets them in Tar Valon before everyone leaves again, and so I was wondering if maybe he was gonna meet them on the way to Tyr, but now that I don't think they're doing Tyr or the Stone of Tyr this season, I'm wondering how he's going to be reintroduced. Will he have also been in Falma or somewhere nearby? Will he be in Tar Valon, and will some of the characters return to Tar Valon, and he'll meet back up with them there, because Mat still has the dagger now at this point, but needs to be fully healed from it and fully separated from it. I'm wondering if he'll have to go back, and that would also be interesting if they bring Min back and pull her back into Tar Valon, if they meet up again there, after their little conflict last season. We not only still need to be introduced to Elaine's brothers, and a lot of that takes place in Tar Valon, but some of these main characters still need to be introduced to Elaine's brothers. So I'm still a little bit up in the air whether or not some of the girls will return to Tar Valon at all, or whether or not some of them are just going to go straight to Chanchico, because we know that's another location that will be featured in season 3, and then if the other characters are just going to go straight to the waste. So I'm wondering who, if anyone, out of the main cast will be returning to Tar Valon in season 3, because Tom in the novels really feels protective over Rand, especially because of what happened with his nephew, who was a man who could channel. So I'm wondering if he is still going to be wanting to look out for Rand like he couldn't with his nephew, and that's what will pull him back into the story now that Rand has been publicly proclaimed the Dragon Reborn, or if maybe we'll tie him back in with Mat somehow. I'm also curious as to whether or not we're going to see the concept of the bubbles of evil in the show like we do in the books, or if maybe all of those random happenings, like in this scene in the Stone of Tear, everyone's weapons suddenly come to life and start attacking them. Mat gets attacked by figures out of playing cards come to life in some trippy Alice in Wonderland nightmare. We also see random attacks from other Forsaken happening. So I'm curious if we're going to see this concept overall in the show with the rushed timeline that we're getting of basically the breakdown of the pattern of reality and the strengthening of the Dark One's touch and influence on the world with these what they call bubbles of evil, where it's just crazy freak accident happenings or spontaneous human combustion, plagues of flies and locusts, all these crazy things that are just signs of the Dark One being more and more loose on the world as they get closer and closer to the last battle, or if they're just going to have these things happen but attribute them to the Forsaken, or if they're not going to happen at all. Because even Rand, when the weapons attacking them thing is happening, Rand thinks that it's an act of the Forsaken. So I'm wondering what's going to happen with Rand, if he's not going to the Stone, if they'll open the show with them still being in Falma, or if maybe he'll be back in Cairhien, because we still have some important storylines to see play out there. But we also see that when it comes to this love triangle between Rand and Egwene, and then we also have his love interests of Elaine and Min introduced in the show so far, and then Elaine and Rand had their little meet cute moment at the end of last season. In the novels, Rand is now already coming to see Egwene more like a sister, and I think especially after everything that Egwene went through last season and finding out that Rand was not dead like she thought the whole time, that would definitely maybe drive a wedge between them and their relationship and cool down their whole love story aspect. I think they will definitely be seeing each other differently after all of that. In the novels, it's very much Robert Jordan doing his thing where he tries to flip sexism, flip gender roles on their head, presented very much as, oh, Egwene has also already decided that she sees Rand more like a brother and knows that Elaine is already really smitten with him, gives them her blessing, and not only gives them her blessing, but basically pushes Elaine in front of him and is hey, by the way, I don't like you like that anymore. Here's Elaine. Anyway, I'm gonna leave you two alone to get to know each other. Bye. It's very much presented as if Rand, they've already decided the matter between themselves, and Rand has no say in it. But we also see the character of Barrowlane introduced in this novel, and the love triangle conflict between Barrowlane, Perrin, and Faile, which I don't think we're going to see now because we're not going to Tear, and she's only important and introduced because of Tear. So yeah, I think we're going to be skipping all of that. for the sake of just probably focusing on building up the relationship between Perrin and Faile first, and maybe having her tag along with them to Rivers for whatever reason, because she's stubborn and decides to. And so we'll see them establish and flesh out that relationship first before we throw them into a love triangle conflict and test the relationship later by throwing Berelain in the mix. We do see a scene, I think, if not the prologue, but in the first couple chapters, we do see Elaida introduced and get a point of view from her character, and we do know that she has been cast and is going to be an important figure in the next season. So we get a little kind of cold open with her here, which I wouldn't be surprised if we also get in the show in Caemlyn. I think it's been rumored to be a filming location for next season, so I wouldn't be surprised if we don't spend very much time in Caemlyn, but do get the Caemlyn cold open that I've been predicting since season 1, where we're introduced to Morgause and possibly the brothers and Elaida, because Elaida is the royal advisor to the Queen of Andor, and here we get an interesting insight in the novels to why that is. Elaida has been working as the royal advisor for the Queen of Andor for a very, very long time, especially with what we know of Aes Sedai aging. Here, it is revealed that Elaida also has the ability, much like we saw with the character of Gitara, being the one to foretell Rand being born, but Elaida also has the ability of foretelling, and that the very first thing that she ever foretold while she was still unaccepted in training is that the royal line of Andor would be the key to defeating the Dark One in the last battle. She doesn't know how or why, just that somehow the royal line of Andor was going to be key to defeating the Dark One in the last battle, and so she had attached herself to Queen Morgause as soon as it was clear that she would be the one to inherit the throne. And so now it goes on to get a little insight into Eleida's character and build up this conflict between her and Siuan as the Amyrlin, that all of this effort, all of these years of sacrifice, of sticking herself to the Queen's side, was all for nothing because Elayne has disappeared. The heir to Andor, the royal line of Andor, which is crucial to the last battle, is missing, and no one knows where she is. She's either been taken captive by Shan-Chan or White Cloaks, no one quite knows. We know that it was Liandrin or the Black Aja that were responsible, but it's also interesting to note that Elaida thinks to herself that she might have been Amyrlin herself had she not concentrated all her focus and energy on Andor. Hint, hint. So this is going to be definitely the introduction to this conflict and just adding another log on the fire for basically, to burn Siuan Sanche at the stake and hold her accountable for all these things that have been happening under her watch as Amyrlin, and I think lead to all of the things stacked against her leading up to her being overthrown. We also get a little bit of backstory here that during Eleida's time as an accepted in the Tower, some of the novices that she was responsible for looking after and helping to teach were Siuan and Moiraine themselves. So she went from teaching Siuan and Moiraine as novices to now having Siuan be over her as Amyrlin's seat and pretty much be responsible for letting Moiraine and the Dragon Reborn run amok. Because, she goes to say whatever Siuan was up to, she had to be stopped. She also thinks that the Hall of the Tower was already speaking about watching over and even guiding all of these Ta'veren, but they would never agree to dispose of them, of the one in particular, as he must be disposed of, for the good of the Tower, for the good of the world. So Elaida, it should be noted, is of the Red Aja, which is the she-woman man-haters club, and so not only are they infamous for being the ones responsible for hunting down and getting rid of men who can channel, they're just kind of notorious for having members who are misandrous in general and just hate all men, not just men who can channel. And I think she's definitely one of those. She in particular thinks that the idea that they just have to allow the existence of a man who can channel just because he's the dragon is like the scariest thing in all of existence to her. So we can already see these little hints that she's very much not okay with this line of thinking, and that, you know, while others might think that Rand needs to be let off the leash or that he needs to be allowed to maintain his ability to channel but kept a close watch over, or maybe like kept prisoner until the last battle, she, it seems, would be much happier and much more satisfied if he was not allowed to exist at all and could just be quietly gotten rid of. Her scene ends with, one way or another, Siuan would be stopped before she could destroy the tower. This concept of Rand as the Dragon Reborn automatically translating into being the Aiel savior is not a one-to-one comparison, not even for the Aiel. And they make a point of bringing this up early on in The Shadow Rising, when Rand and Perrin are talking to the Aiel, which here is like Bane, Shiat, and Gaul. For the record, they better fucking cast Gaul and have him in the show, because he is like hands down, and I know I say this all the time about everybody, but he is definitely one of my favorite characters. Gaul and Rhuarc, oh, I love them so much. But especially just like the relationships that Gaul and Perrin and Rand and Rhuarc have with each other, of like just keeping Rand grounded especially, and like teaching them Aiel humor and things like that. I just really hope that we get to see that, especially with Gaul in the show. Gaul, the way he was introduced, was replaced with Avienda's storyline, but I'm still really hoping that we get to see him and that maybe they will meet up with some other groups of Aiel who were looking for Rand before they go to the Two Rivers, and that Gaul will be one of them. I want to say that there were some leaked photos from the Two Rivers set that might have shown some male Aiel being on set, and I really hope one of them is Gaul. But he goes on to say that the Dragon Reborn is only a Wetlander prophecy, and their prophecy specifically is he who comes with the dawn. The characters ask them, like, well, I thought they were the same, so why did you come here if you weren't looking for the dragon? Because to them, another name for the Aiel is the people of the dragon. But Rhuarc not only is very, like, wary of having this term, people of the dragon, applied to them, he goes on to correct them and state that in their prophecies of the dragon, the fall of the stone and the taking of Kalandor proclaim the dragon has been reborn. But the Aiel prophecies only state that the stone must fall before he who comes with the dawn appears to come to take us back to what was ours. They may be one man, but I doubt even the wise ones could say for sure. So I think that just goes to show that just because Rand has proven himself to be the Dragon Reborn to some people, that does not automatically mean that A, he is going to be accepted as the Dragon Reborn by everybody, and also that he is automatically going to be accepted as the Aiel's prophesied one. Now, in the novels, we stay, as I said, in the Stone of Tear for a while, and one of the storylines that we get is some of the Aes Sedai have already been outed as Black Aja at this point, and not only that, Moiraine and the Supergirls actually managed to have two of them held captive and are trying to get some information out of them about other members of the Black Aja and what their plans are, and especially what their plans might be for Rand. Because in the Dragon Reborn novel, everyone was trying to converge in the Stone of Tear. Rand was going there for his own reasons. All of his friends were trying to basically chase him there, and the girls ended up leaving the tower again after escaping the Shan-Chan to go there because they find out that the Black Aja are going to be there laying in wait for Rand to try to trap him somehow. And so they're trying to figure out what their plans were for Rand. How were they going to trap him somehow? And so we see one of the Aes Sedai that they have, one of the Black Sisters that they have captive here, is none other than Joya Bair, who is a character in the TV show. We've seen her, especially in last season, she's kind of been on screen anytime that people were talking about the Black Aja. And so we know that she is actually a member of the Black Aja in the novels. She is one of the ones that they have captive, and they're trying to get information out of her about Liandrin and what their plans are. And they end up finding out that Liandrin knows about the existence of a male Adam, a male collar and leash that can be used to control a man who can channel by a woman. So basically, do what Siuan was talking about in last season and turn Rand into a male Damani. Jorah actually ends up later being killed in the Shadow Rising, but we know that there are 6 Black Aja who escape the tower and go to Tanchico with Liandrin. 2 brown, 2 green, and 1 white. And we know that Tanchico is confirmed as a location for Season 3. So I think that the girls' plotline with Elaine and Nynaeve is going to be primarily focusing on chasing Liandrin and some of these other Black sisters to Tanchico and trying to catch them before they can get their hands on this item and have a way of being able to control Rand, because that would obviously be very bad. We also find out that Moghedien knows about the existence of the Adam, but in the novels, she is not working alongside the Black Aja. She's just kind of doing her own thing. And Moghedien was introduced as a new Forsaken at the end of Season 2. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing a lot more of her popping up in scenes in the World of Dreams, because the World of Dreams, I think, will start to become much more of an important factor in Season 3, and then she's also a major player in the Tanchico storyline. But right now, all they know is that Liandrin says there's something in Tanchico, and it's something dangerous to Rand, and that when they find it, his filthy ability will bind him for us. In the novels, we then move on to a very important scene, and one that I know I, alongside many other book fans, were eagerly awaiting, and still are, to see if we're going to get it in the show, and that is the Red Doorway ter'angreal, which are portal stones to the world of the Eilfin and the Eilfin, which is basically this other dimension populated by these non-human magical entities. If we're skipping the Stone of Tyr, where this red doorway is located, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to get it in the novels, because they end up later finding a second identical portal stone red doorway in Rhuidean, which we know we are going to next season. Now, I, for one, really hope that we do get this storyline in the show, because I think it is very important, especially for Mat and his later storylines and story arcs in the novels. Because Mat might have been partially cured of his tie to the dagger, but one of the after effects of it was that he had like all these gaps and holes in his memory. So in Season 2, we saw him kind of allude to the hint that he has these memories in his head, especially after he blows the Horn of Valere and says like, oh, I remember, and then meets Arthur Hawkwing, and we get these allusions to the fact that, you know, he's lived multiple lifetimes and like fought alongside Arthur Hawkwing in some of them. We get these little hints in the novels that he already has these memories in his mind, because he's already like randomly speaking and understanding the old tongue and exploiting his luck as a Ta'veren even before he goes to the doorways and meets the Eilfin and Eilfin. So I feel like in the show he may still be dealing with this issue of like having memories jumbled in his head, and one of his goals in going through the doorway to get these boons granted from these elfin-like figures is that he wants the gaps in his memories filled. He's also just the epitome of curiosity killed the cat. And so, like, if you put this shiny button in front of him, as we saw last season, he's not going to be able to resist the temptation. So they find this doorway, and despite all of the warnings to stay away from it, Mat, Rand, and Moiraine all end up going through it. And not only that, they all end up going through it at pretty much the same time. And I think either just that having that many people in there all at once, or just having Rand in there as someone who can channel might have been sending the Aelfinn and Ealfinn into a tizzy, because like they're not able to stay there for very long before they're basically like shoved back out of the doorway again. But in the show, Mat still needs his Ashandarai spear, and even if they're replacing that with the dagger on a steek, he still needs his fox medallion. So if we don't get it in Tear, I really hope we do at least get Mat going through the doorway in Ruidian, because there is another red doorway there, and it will give him something to do for his character while Rand's going through his Ruidian ordeal. But I'm also curious to see if we're going to skip the Stone of Tear, how they're going to build up the relationship between Elaine and Rand, because a lot of that ends up happening during their few days, and I do mean days, spent in the Stone of Tear together. Rand has been publicly proclaimed the dragon. He goes to Tear so that he can get Callandor and like gain even more support and even more of a following, hopefully like rally the Terrans to his side and have them to use as an army. Moiraine doesn't want him to do that. I think she wanted him to take Ilion. Moiraine wants him to go after the Forsaken Samael, because she says Samael is in the neighboring country of Ilion, and Tyr and Ilion have been like arch nemesis for forever. So now that he has control of Tyr, they would like willingly follow him into battle against Samael. I don't know if they want to poke that hornet's nest right away, and so I don't think he will end up doing that. He's gonna go straight to Ruidian. We also get an interesting scene where the girls try to teach Rand about channeling, and it just further demonstrates like just how different channeling works for men and women, and why it's not a one-to-one translation, and kind of like comparing apples to oranges, and so it's really difficult to impossible for a woman to teach a man to channel. But here in the novels, Elaine and Rand end up bonding a lot in their time in Tyr, because as I was saying, now that Rand is publicly proclaimed the Dragon Reborn, he does have to, as this like scruffy sheep herder from the backwater woods of the Two Rivers, have to project this aura of being a lord, being a leader, being someone who is to be listened to and respected by all these high lords and ladies, who are basically like, listen, just because you're the second coming of Jesus doesn't mean you get to tell me what to do or how to run my country. One of the things that really endears Rand to Elaine and brings them closer together is that she has all this background training and knowledge as the future Queen of Andor and being raised as the future heir. She knows a lot about diplomacy and politics. And so she is not only able to share with Rand what she knows, she really appreciates the fact that even though she is a woman, he listens to her. He listens to her advice, and he takes it into account. So I'm wondering what they're gonna do to have that relationship build between them, and like where they're gonna have that take place at before he leaves to go to the Waste. They do end up not having a lot of time together, even in the novels. It's only something like a couple of days before they end up having to leave and go their separate ways again, and he ends up going with the Aiel, and she ends up going with Nynaeve to Tanchico to stop the Black Aja. So it is still like a very quick timeline to develop a romance either way. If we're leaving out Stone of Tear entirely, I'm wondering where that romantic development will take place at. We also do see the return of Lanfear in the early chapters in the Stone of Tear, so she is not leaving her hands 100% off of Lews Therin, but she's definitely having to be a lot more subtle and secretive about how and when she appears to him. She is also already kind of noticing a difference in Rand, developing not only into more of this outward like leader, but this like stronger, harder outward persona that he's beginning to develop, that he thinks he has to project to the world. He's kind of already going down this very slippery slope of, do I want to be loved or feared? So here we also are starting to see the very beginnings of Rand's primary internal conflict in the novels, which is his reluctance to harm or kill women, even when it's Lanfear. Now, with the relationship that they have established in the show so far, where she is like still very much hung up on him and was like still doing things to like help him out, and he was deliberately asking for her help despite knowing that she was a Forsaken, I think that would go a long way toward justifying his reluctance to just get rid of Lanfear despite how dangerous she is. But yeah, he just has this overall reluctance to do anything against women, even if they are certified dark friends and actively trying to harm him. And so I'm really hoping that with the more modernized, updated take that we're getting on some of these characters and gender politics in the show, that will be a little bit less of a factor and a little bit less of an issue for him. Because I get that to like Rand, it's just his line in the sand that he doesn't want to cross because he's doing all these things and having to make all these harsh calls and do all of these destructive things, whether he wants to or not, as the dragon. That is his way of like maintaining a shred of humanity. But yeah, if there's a dark friend standing right across from you actively trying to kill you, maybe you can defend yourself even if she has a vagina. Just saying. But we also see these little hints here that she's going to still be helping him behind the scenes. She says here to Rand that if she takes credit for helping him, he might expect her to help him all the time, and that could be deadly because none of the others, i.e. none of the other Forsaken, is really certain where I stand, and I like it that way. So you can expect no open aid from me. Well, that's kind of been flipped on its head in the show, and I think, yeah, Moghedien and Ishamael definitely knew that Lanfear was overtly helping Rand, so she will have to be moving a lot more in the shadows if she wants to help him in the show now. I'm really curious if we will get to see this scene play out at some point, because I think it's very brief scene, but it's very impactful and very important to Rand's character development, especially as someone who's trying to learn how to use his abilities as a channeler, where they get attacked by Trollocs and a bunch of Myrddraal. And he is just kind of instinctively able to not only tap into saidin, but to do all these crazy weaves that no one's ever seen before. Like, he just calls lightning out left and right, this ball lightning that's just streaking around the whole Stone of Tyr. And to me, it almost seems like it's describing this giant Tesla coil that's just vaporizing everyone. But we're also starting to see these first little glimmers that channeling with the corruption on saidin is starting to affect Rand. And this is a really big aspect that we see being played out in the books already, where a lot of Rand's friends, even the Emond's Fielders, are a little bit wary, if not outright scared of Rand as a male channeler, and just scared that he's already going insane, and like with the bubbles of evil and the Forsaken attacks, like scared that maybe he's the one behind them, seeing just what he can do with the power and the way he's just able to like obliterate all of these dark forces so easily. Even Moiraine is a little bit wary of him. There's this very important scene in the beginning of the novel where after this Trolloc attack in the tower, unfortunately one of the victims is a little girl. And so seeing this child has been killed because this place was attacked because of him really gets to Rand and really makes him feel a lot of guilt. But he's also like so heady in this rush of power from everything that he just did with that huge amount of the power, and it's still like coursing through his veins. And like I said in some of my earlier videos, channeling is basically like being on heroin or cocaine. You feel really good while you have the power in you. And so while Rand is full of the power, staring at this poor dead child, he does have this moment of madness where he thinks that he can do anything with Saidin. And he tries to literally bring this dead girl back to life with the power. But it's just really horrifying almost, because it's just like, it's not right. He's not able to do it. He can reanimate the corpse, but he can't put the soul back into the body and like actually restore this person to life. Only the creator can do that. Moiraine really has to try to get it through to him that death is the one thing that cannot be healed, and like this is the one thing that he cannot do with the power, which they kind of got a little wishy-washy with that at the end of season 1, with things that were going down with like Egwene healing Nynaeve from near death. But I'm really wondering if we're going to get a scene like this from Rand, because I feel like it's really important to establish those limitations of what you can do with the power as a human being, and just really important for Rand's character to establish what he can do as the Dragon Reborn and what he can't do. So get back into a little bit more to where I think the show is going to deviate from the novels. Since we're skipping the Stone of Tear, I think we are hopefully going to have the dream world and Tel'aran'rhiod introduced as more of a prominent aspect in season 3, because a lot of things end up taking place in the dream world in the Shadow Rising, especially while Egwene is learning to master this ability as one of her talents. Not only that, her and Elaine and Nynaeve are all working to master how to navigate things in the world of dreams in order to kind of spy on the Black Aja sisters and figure out where they're going in Tanchico and like what this mysterious object is that they're looking for, because they don't know it's a male Adam. They just know it's something dangerous to Rand. All they know is that they need to go to Tanchico and that they need to find this mysterious object, whatever it is, before Liandrin and the Black Sisters do. So in the novels, it's Varen who gives Egwene the dream Terangrial when she's back in the tower, but I don't know if any of them are going to be returning to the tower, so I'm not sure how that's gonna work. Varen's been kind of like a rogue agent though in the show so far and like doing her own thing, so I wouldn't be surprised if she just like shows up at some point to like accompany Perrin to the Two Rivers and like they all meet up at some point before splitting off. I don't know. But either way, at some point, concept of Dream World and Dream Terangrial will be really introduced and made more prominent, because in the novels, Egwene, Elaine, and Nynaeve are able to chase off some White Cloaks while they're taking Mat back to the tower to be fully healed of the dagger. Yeah, this is when they are introduced to the characters of Galad and Gawain. This is also when Liandrin learns of the male Adam and the Black Aja flee the tower. Swan ends up telling the girls to also leave the tower again to go hunt them, since they are one of the few people that know about Liandrin's secret identity, to also help Rand by going to Tanchico. At this time, both Elaine and Egwene are also raised to accepted. Tom also shows up in, I think he'll probably either show up in Tar Valon if any of the characters return there, and that's where he'll get clued into what's going on and like meet up with them to accompany them to Tanchico, or he just might already be in Tanchico and show up there to help the girls. Like I said, in the show, Perrin is already in with the Aiel at this point, and so I think he's going to introduce them to Rand. I think they are still going to be willing to help Rand take the Stone of Tear, but in the show, they might say that like first he has to go to Ruidian to cement his identity as the Car'a'carn to them and earn their allegiance and their support. Mat will get healed of the dagger, but like using the horn has still left his memories kind of a mess, which will still tempt him into the Red Doorway. And then another thing that I'm going to predict for show versus books is that in the books, Elaine asks Rand to kiss her first, but I wouldn't be surprised if the show changed it to just make Elaine be the one to kiss him first. Interestingly, chapter 12 of the book is called Tanchico or the Tower. I'm still really conflicted on who, if any, of the characters are going to return to the tower at all. But here, instead of returning to the tower, they obviously decide that they have to go to Tanchico to hunt the Black Aja and help Rand. And then here, Avienda, we find out, knows the Wise One Amis, because Amis is a former Maiden of the Spear and also a talented Dreamwalker who begins to appear to Egwene and also Moiraine. No, she doesn't appear to Moiraine. Amis appears to Egwene in the world of dreams and demands that Egwene come to her for training as a Dreamwalker because it's really dangerous for someone who's untrained and doesn't know what they're doing to just be walking around in the world of dreams. It's also interesting to note that Amis is the wife of Ruar, an important clan chief among the Aiel. I also wouldn't be surprised if season 3 is where we start to see the concept of Aiel's sister wives introduced, but perhaps in a more feminist way. I have a feeling that Egwene may still meet Amis in a dream and learn about her Dreamwalker ability, and after some conversations with them and the other girls and finding out about Tanchico, will decide not to return to the tower, and Nynaeve and Elaine decide to go to Tanchico to follow Liandrin. And interestingly, Amis, because she's a Dreamwalker, and this also gives you some ability to predict things in the future, she ends up not only appearing to Egwene to demand Egwene go to the Waste for training, but also sends Moiraine a letter while they are in Tyr, bidding Moiraine to bring Avienda to them for Wise One training. So we also end up finding out that Avienda has the ability to channel, and this is a major source of conflict for her and a source of her character development because she doesn't want to have to give up her life as a Maiden of the Spear. She really likes it. She feels an immense amount of pride in it and that identity, so she goes through like this identity conflict and crisis when that's stripped away from her. Because she can channel, she's not given a choice. She has to be trained and become a Wise One, which is the Aiel version of, like, it's not really an Aes Sedai because you don't have to have the ability to channel to become a Wise One, which is interesting, but it is a bonus. But yeah, I think it's the other way. Like, you don't have to be a channeler to become a Wise One, but if you are a channeler, you do have to become a Wise One. So I'm curious if at some point they will either perhaps meet up with Varen and learn more about World of Dreams and get Dream Terangrial from her still, or if Egwene will just learn more about Teleron Riyadh from Moiraine, or Amis might also appear to Moiraine in a dream, or just start appearing to them all in the World of Dreams to teach them about it and demand they go for training. One thing that I think they might have hinted at in a plot summary or teaser for next season was that Nynaeve is having important dreams, but she's not the dreamer in the novel, so I was a little like, what? You better not take that away from Egwene. But since they did the storyline in season 2 where Nynaeve was trapped in the archways during her accepted test, and we know the archways interact somehow with the World of Dreams with the way that they work, she was kind of trapped in the World of Dreams when she was trapped in there, so that might kind of give her a connection to it still, and like a pathway for other people to enter her dreams and speak to her. So I will be interested to see who, if anyone, returns to the White Tower in the show, especially Mat. Yeah, in the novels, he needs to return to get separated from the dagger, and then the horn also goes there for safekeeping until the last battle. But I'm wondering if they're going to let him keep the dagger in the show, because this might help to kind of set up Padan Fain as more of a direct antagonist to him, because Fain wants the dagger. Mat is supposed to return the horn and the dagger to the tower, and then he also, like, fights with Elaine's brothers, and so I'm wondering, like, if Elaine will feel at all duty-bound to return and let everyone know that she's not missing, because right now everyone thinks she's still missing, or if she's just going to remain in runaway status. Like, if that would be, like, Swan's cover story, is that they're just runaways. I really hope that they do keep the Aelfin and Ealfin plot for Mat. I think it really is important to his story arc, and they do name drop the travels of Jane Farstrider in season 1 of the show, and that ends up becoming a prominent figure later. navigator. Spoilers, that is the character of Noel, who shows up later and ends up becoming kind of like Matt's sidekick. And one thing that's people that kind of mentioned about the show so far was that like a lot of other Emond's Field characters have had a mentor figure for them, but Matt doesn't have one yet, and I think Noel is his like mentor figure. His story also ties in with the Eowyn and Eowyn, and it ties in with Moiraine's storyline, which I think might be a big plot point that we see as soon as season 3. I hope we do get the Red Doorway to Angreal. I'm also still curious if we're gonna get portal stones at all, because in the novel, Rand ends up taking a portal stone to get them all to Ruidian, because otherwise I don't know how they're going to get there so quickly. I think it has been hinted at as a plot for season 3 that we're going to see Forsaken in disguise. I think that is definitely alluding to Lanfear being in disguise with Asmodean so she can follow them to the Ideal Waste, and maybe while she's there in disguise, she could be the one to tell Rand about Callandor, because she's always like in the novels like prodding Rand to like seize glory and like do all these things because she wants to be like ultimate power couple with him. So I could definitely see her being the one to like tell him about Callandor and like start goading him to go for it, because in the novels Rand has just been reading books of prophecy in his spare time, and because he wants to learn about like what prophecy says about him, and so he decides to go after Callandor on his own. The issue with that is that once he takes it from the stone, any of the Forsakens could still go like grab it then and use it against him. So I could see like why they don't want to go for it right away, and like I said, it's not really a big important thing until later. But yeah, I could see Lanfear being the one to try to lure him to it, to take it for under the guise of like he needs it for more power and protection. We also do see the Atha-Anmir, or the Sea Folk, introduced in this novel, and they've also been confirmed to be introduced in the show. In the novels, an Atha-Anmir ship is chartered to take the girls to Chanchico, and then while they're there, Elaine and Nynaeve learn that the Sea Folk Windfinders, which are responsible for like steering the ship where it needs to go, like the navigator, are also women who can channel, and that they're such good navigators and sailors because they can literally like summon up whatever winds they need or like chase the storms away. They also come with their own separate groups of their own separate prophecies for their own special version of the Chosen One, who they call the Coromor. They know that prophecies are being fulfilled. Their prophecy is called the Jendai prophecy, the prophecy of the Coromor. Not the one you wait for and dread, the one we seek, the herald of a new age. At the breaking of the world, our ancestors fled to the safety of the sea while the land heaved and broke as storm waves do. It is said they knew nothing of the ships they took to flee, but the light was with them and they survived. They did not see the land again until it was still once more, and by then much had changed. It was in the years after that the Jendai prophecy was first spoken. We must wander the waters until the Coromor returns and serve him at his coming. They see the prophecy as being fulfilled and Rand as being the Coromor because they see Elaine and Nynaeve and Moiraine kind of being at Rand's beck and call as a prophecy to them that Aes Sedai will serve him. It says that also in their prophecies, the White Tower shall be broken by his name, and Aes Sedai shall kneel to wash his feet and dry them with their hair. This definitely reminds me of the story of Mary Magdalene washing the feet of Christ in the Bible, and just another allusion to Rand as this messianic figure. So I'm really excited to see the introduction of the Sea Folk and their culture introduced, because it's just another like really rich, diverse culture to explore within the Wheel of Time, and I can't wait to see what the costume designers are going to do with it. We also then see Perrin, Faile, Loial, and his handful of Aiel friends leaving for the Two Rivers because they find out that the White Cloaks are going there to try to attack it to lure Rand out. And Rand's very conflicted about this because he wants to go defend his homeland, but he also knows it's a trap and that they're doing this to draw him out and that he has other things that he needs to do. He feels bad for kind of abandoning his home, but but he also kind of knows that he has his friends. He feels like he's using them in a sense, but like Perrin also feels an obligation for the Two Rivers, and even Mat, when he goes to the Red Doorway, one of the things he asks the Aelfin and Ealfin is, should I go home? Should I go back to the Two Rivers to help them? But it's the Aelfin and the Ealfin who tell Mat, no, you have to go to Rhuidean with Rand or you're gonna die. That's all they say. That's Mat's entire reason for going to Rhuidean, is basically just that he was told that he has to or he's going to die. So I'm curious to see where they're gonna end up sending Mat in the show, because he doesn't really have a whole lot to do in Rhuidean other than like be kind of the comic relief sidekick for Rand and then go through the other Red Doorway once they get there. So I'm curious where he's gonna go. Maybe they will send him to the tower and then to help the girls or something. I'm not sure. Editing me here to drop in that according to the WhatUp channel, it's been rumored that Mat has not been sighted on set for filming in the Waste/Rhuidean. So this could mean that my hunch is correct, and sadly we may not get to see Mat go through a Red Doorway after all, as it could be he is going to be in Tanchico with the girls instead, and they're going to combine that with him helping them for the Bowl of Wind storyline. Not sure how I feel about that. Rand will be on his own because Egwene also goes with him to the Aiel Waste because she needs Dreamwalker training from the Wise One. And I'm hoping that in the Aiel lands we will get a little bit more focus on Egwene and her training with the Wise Ones, because once we get to the Waste, we don't really get a lot of POV from Egwene after that point. It's all like Rand's perspective once we're with the Aiel for the most part. And so like I'm in the show really loving that there's a little bit more of a focus on Egwene's growth and character arc. I like her journey and character arc in the series, and I feel like it's just as important as Rand's. In The Shadow Rising, we are beginning to see a little bit of tension or like straining against the bonds between Lan and Moiraine, because in the novel we get these little hints of the little that we've seen of Lan and Moiraine and their interactions. He's more openly defying her or disagreeing with her in front of the others. She, in her inner monologue, knows that his loyalty and his focus is shifting to Nynaeve. I also think it will be interesting to see if we get any of that aspect in the novels of Rand's friends, all except for maybe Nynaeve, being very wary of Rand in The Shadow Rising and scared of him, especially Mat. Almost all of Mat's point of views, he at some point is worrying about being near Rand because Rand is going to go mad, and worried that Rand is already going mad. So yeah, I'm wondering if he or any of them are still going to be acting this way in the show, because there was such an emphasis, especially in season 2, that Ishamael and the Forsaken were wanting to like use that to drive a wedge between Rand and his friends and isolate him from them, but he ended up not being drawn to the dark side because it was proven to him that his friends were going to be there for him and be there to literally back him up in the fight and weren't going to abandon him just because he was a man who can channel and the dragon. In the novels, they know he's Rand and like the same, like the guy that they grew up with, but they're scared of him now. They're a little wary around him. I'm also especially curious to see in the show in particular if they're ever going to bring up that little pact or bargain that Mat and Rand made between themselves in season 1, where they agreed that if one of them was the dragon and was going crazy, that they would take the other person out. Some little hints that we start to get early on in The Shadow Rising that will come back into play later in the novel when Rand goes through the Pillars in Rhuidean and learns about the true origin of the Aiel. Because we see Gaul and the other Aiel who are going to the Two Rivers with Perrin, and Aiel in general just absolutely refuse to ride a horse. They will not ride a horse unless they have to, and then not a step further than absolutely necessary. None of the Aiel would, and Perrin did not understand why. He thinks it's pride, perhaps, in their ability to run for long distances. The Aiel made it seem more than that, but he suspected none of them could have explained. We also run back into the Tuathan, or the Tinkers or traveling people, when they return to the Two Rivers, and that it is also a Tuathan custom that only the young or infirm are allowed to ride in the wagons. Everyone who is able-bodied among the Tuatha'an also has to walk. Let's file that away for later. A funny quote here in chapter 20 from Nynaeve, and just another play on gender dynamics that Robert Jordan goes for in these books. Nynaeve is talking to Elaine about Rand and says that men always overreact when they let their emotions go. It's the price they pay for holding them in the way they do. So that's funny because, in our society, in our gender stereotypes, women are said to be ridiculously emotional, overly emotional, and can't control their emotions. And here, they're stereotyping men for never being able to show their emotions and always holding them in. Here's a little bit of dialogue that I have highlighted from Loial, and I really hope that we not only get to see a lot of Loial in the Two Rivers, since he goes with Perrin for the Battle of the Two Rivers that we're going to be focusing on in season 3, or maybe Matt, or Lan, or even myself, or Tom Maryland. Not a gleeman, but what? Who can say? Not eating fire, but breathing it, hurling it about like an Aes Sedai. Rand al'Thor may be lucky if the next age remembers his name correctly, which is funny because, Rand al'Thor, Thor. We also here in this novel get the other interesting allusions to ages before the Age of Legends that Robert Jordan likes to hint and tease at. He goes on to say, go back further, back to the oldest tales I know, from the age before the Age of Legends. Did Mosk and Merk really fight with spears of fire, and were they even giants? And that is a hint at Mosk as in Moscow and Merk as in Murica, fighting with spears of fire being nuclear weapons during the Cold War. Was Elsbeth really queen of the whole world? And that is Queen Elizabeth, who I think Caemlyn and Morghese and Elaine are really heavily based on. And was Anla really her sister? Was Anla truly the wise counselor, or was it someone else? And Anla is an abbreviation for the advice columnist Anne Landers. So interesting that we get these hints of things from even our age that are just fragments of fragments being passed down, but still half remembered even in the third age of the Wheel of Time. And just a further hint that the Age of Legends was this utopia kind of similar to the age that we live in now. And that the Wheel of Time is all taking place in some future iteration of the Earth as we know it. Not an important plot point, but it's a cool one that I wanted to point out to you guys. Now, sadly, like I said, once the Emond's Fielders and the main cast of characters split off into their own separate story arcs, and Rand gets to the Aiel Waste, we don't really get a lot of focus on Egwene, even though she is there, trying to get the Wise Ones to train her as a Dreamwalker. It's interesting that Ruidian also contains archway terangrial, much like the ones used by the Aes Sedai in the Tower to give women their accepted and Aes Sedai tests, and that Moiraine chooses to go through this archway, even though she doesn't have to. She wants to, I think, because it lets you see different weavings of the pattern and different ways that things could go, and maybe she wants to get some insight from that. Because, not only does Aviendha have to go into Ruidian to go through the archways, kind of as a Wise One version of an accepted test, but then, Moiraine asked to go as well. Not only that, but Matt also asked to go because the Aelfin and Ealfin told him he had to go to Ruidian. So even though it goes against Aiel custom to let anyone who's not Aiel go to Ruidian, it's this hidden secret city that only even very special, specific members of the Aiel are allowed to go to, as part of the either test to become a Wise One or test to become a clan chief if you're a man. But we're already seeing them having to break with tradition upon Rand's arrival because there's already argument over whether or not he's enough of an Aiel to be able to go, even though genetically he has Aiel heritage. He knows nothing of their culture and their customs, so they still view him as an outsider. And this is also where we get the character of Couladin introduced, and I know that they did put out allegedly a casting call for this character, and that they are are going to be setting up season 3 to not only have Rand become the Karakharn, but also already show the breaking and the splitting of the Aiel and the splitting off of the Shaido led by Couladin as anti-Rand adversaries who refuse to accept him as Karakharn because to them he's an outsider. Because then we also see that Mat asked leave to enter Ruidian, and so Rand, Mat, and Moiraine all being given leave to break with custom and go to this special place just really sends Couladin off the deep end and just kind of turns him into this anti-Rand zealot. So that's already just kind of setting up this rivalry and these tensions amongst the Aiel from the minute that Rand gets there. It's just this constant conflict with Rand where he wants to go to these places and do these things that he feels he needs to or has to as the dragon, but he's also getting to know these people and he doesn't want to do any more harm to them than necessary, but just with his presence and his existence, it's going to create conflict between people. I think I even said this in my other videos. I'm sure nowadays, if Jesus Christ literally did return for the second coming, there would be people who would be skeptical and not believe him. And it's the same with Rand. Just because you can show up and channel and proclaim yourself the Dragon Reborn doesn't mean people are gonna buy it. He sees it as his mission is to unite everyone behind him before the last battle, but that's as easy as herding cats. So I am really excited to see Aiel culture and see more of that in season 3, and especially with Ruidian and like all of these hints at things from the Age of Legends, which are one of my favorite things about the novels. I'm really looking forward to spending a lot more time with the Aiel and learning about their culture. I also think it's interesting that when they are getting ready to go do their ordeals in Ruidian, Amys and the other wise ones tell them that they are not allowed to carry food or water with them in remembrance of our wanderings after the breaking, and you must go to Ruidian unarmed, save with your hands and your own heart, to honor the Gen, which we later find out has much to do with the true background and history of the Aiel, which I know is going to be hopefully a big focus in the show. The showrunner, Rafe Judkins, has stated that the writers, when they were going through and writing this season, were really trying to pick out a couple of stories to carve out space to make a whole episode out of. And I'm just like, please let it be Rand's journey through the pillars, similarly to when last season we had like an entire episode focused on Nynaeve's accepted test. I really think we need to have almost an entire episode focused on Rand's journey through the pillars of Ruidian. Those stories, and I think this is a quote from Rafe Judkins. He says, those stories will really stand out to an audience, especially that didn't read the books, so that they can really follow that character on that journey. So to me, that's really hinting on hopefully having episodes that are really going to spend the bulk of the episode runtime focusing on Ruidian and the history of the Aiel, because it's just such a standout, stellar moment in the novels and really goes to show like the amount of time and effort that Robert Jordan put into his world building. I also find it interesting to note and wanted to point out that the Aiel, and it's kind of made a big deal about that the Aiel know who Lan is, and he kind of has a reputation amongst them, and they call him An Alain, a man alone. So Moiraine asks, why do you call him that? One man alone. Amys says it's because they know of him, they know of the last of the Malkieri, the man who will not give up his war against the Shadow, though his nation is long destroyed by it. They think there is much honor in him. I thought that was cool. I really hope that we do get to touch on that a little bit and get that little bit more of a hint into Lan's background that we haven't really delved very deeply into so far. I also found it ironic that Amys makes a point of telling Moiraine that she thinks that women are coddled in the Tower. I feel like from the little that we see in the novels of how some of the novices are treated, in some ways they are coddled compared to how like Damane are trained. And they say that like the threefold land itself is just no place for coddling. It's a harsh environment to live and grow up in, so like it just doesn't leave any room for people people to be brought up softly or with patience, no matter who you are. But yeah, she makes a point of dissing Moraine and the Tower Aes Sedai for coddling their trainees. And I think after Egwene goes through her Damani training and like is pushed the way that she was, as bad as it is, and as much as she's against Shan-Chan and Damani, I think there is a little bit of room to agree that with especially the last battle coming and how few remaining Aes Sedai there are and just how low and dwindling their numbers have been, that there isn't really a lot of time or room left for slow and steady training and like safe methods of training because they don't want to burn women out or anything. Time is of the essence here, and so if we need to maybe be a little bit more pushy with women and let them really harness the bulk of their potential and their abilities rather than like trying to hold them back out of fear, and kind of see where the Aiel are coming from there. Once again, much like with the Sea Folk women who can channel, the Tower Aes Sedai like do not know that there are a lot of channelers amongst the Aiel, because not only are they just a very isolated, keep to themselves culture, like they just don't send their women to the tower to be trained, and they're like, why would we? You guys are lame. We can train our people ourselves just fine. And we can train them in things that you can't, like dreamwalking. Like that's the whole reason Egwene has to go to them for training as a dreamwalker, is because there is no one in the tower who can teach her. There are a lot of arts that, like, even though the Aes Sedai are holding themselves up as this highest standard of channeling and the end-all be-all of knowledge in the world, they still like have lost a lot of knowledge since the breaking in the Age of Legends, and there are techniques and tricks that other cultures currently in Randland know how to do that they don't. I also wanted to make a note that we see the item known as the Choden Call first hinted at and introduced in The Shadow Rising. It's not overtly named, but attention is called to these items several times throughout the novels, both in Tanchico and Ruidian. And I'm really hoping that they keep this in the show, just because as far as magic fantasy concepts go, this is a big one for me. I think it's just really cool example of high epic fantasy to have these giant ancient half-buried statues from the Age of Legends that were lost during the breaking, and there's a female one and a male one, and they allow channelers to channel insane vast amounts of the one power. And they're so large that the only way you can access the giant statue is through a miniature version of it, which is an access key. And so we see in The Shadow Rising that there's the male statue is half buried in Cairhien. The broken female access key is found by Egwene while she's dreamwalking in Tanchico, and both keys are in Ruidian. So Lanfear and Asmodean, when they're in disguise, traveling to them in the Aiel Waste with everyone, one of the things that they're after is this access key. So I really hope that we keep that, because it's a major factor in later novels and a huge, awesome major plot point in the books. Later on, we get Lanfear in disguise as this overly obese woman called Kaylee, and then she's with Asmodean, who's kind of in disguise as a gleeman, and then these dark friend characters who are traveling with them called Kader and Isendra. So I'm wondering if we're going to keep or cut those characters, if we're going to have, there's these random dark friends whose life has been upended by the introduction of the Forsaken hijacking their caravan for their own purposes. They're trying to be in disguise here, but in the books, we get a lot of hints that Rand definitely knows that all of them are at least very suspicious, and possibly even knows that they are Forsaken in disguise. Now, outside of Ruidian, the other major plot point that we know we're going to be focusing on is Perrin and his journey in the Two Rivers and the battle with the White Cloaks over the Two Rivers. And I'm sure Varen and Alana are also going to be there, as they are in The Shadow Rising. In the novels, they were there under the guise of looking for other girls who could channel, because they knew that Nynaeve and Egwene came from the Two Rivers, and they were so strong in the power that their story was they were just there to see if there were any other female channelers. But I think for the sake of the show and Varen and Alana being much more clued in on the whole Rand being the Dragon Reborn thing, that they will be just more directly and overtly tied into the main plot line. So here we see that they are in the Two Rivers with Perrin, and Perrin does not trust them, especially Alanna for some reason. Not only is she just acting like a very different person at this point because she has sadly lost one of her warders, and that's going to be a very abrupt, shocking, emotionally impactful thing to have to deal with. I'm still really conflicted, both in the novels and in the show, on whether or not Alanna is a dark friend. Because especially in the show, I feel like we're getting some hints that she could be, and even in the novels, it's like not only does Perrin not trust her, she also hints that, much like Elaida does not agree with letting Rand and these other Ta'veren just run amok wherever they want, she feels like they're too important and they need to be watched over. She's talking about this after losing her warder. She knows just how easy it could be for someone to kill Rand before the last battle, and like all of the Ta'veren could be so important that it would be devastating for the side of the light to lose them. That could be some of her motivation for like thinking and acting the way she does going forward. She says that, with the seals on the Darkwood's prison weakening and the last battle coming, the last thing we need is 3 Ta'veren running about loose. I would have tied a string to each of you, even bonded you. But she says that she's not so lost to custom yet as to bond a man against his will. Not quite yet. Her chat in the earlier season, I think season 1, in the tower with Sheriam about Nynaeve being on their side at the last battle. Whose side were they talking about? I thought it was also interesting that Alanna's warders were present for a lot of these conversations that she has. She doesn't hide a lot from them, and it makes me wonder if like one or both of her warders are also dark friends, and if Verin goes with her to the 2 rivers to keep an eye on her because Verin is suspicious of her. I think it's also interesting when you think about the fact that it was revealed that Alanna keeps the bond with one of her warders masked at all times, which, could just be because of like the weird nature of their 3-way relationship, and she's closer to one than the other. But I also think that that would make it ironic and more impactful for the show if one of her warders dies, and the warder who dies is the one who isn't in on it and isn't a dark friend. We also get introduced in this novel to some very important characters for later novels. We get much more Bael Domon. He ends up being one of the people to go to Tanchico with Elaine and Nynaeve to kind of protect them, because it's like a city in turmoil and it's really dangerous and there's just riots in the streets everywhere. So it's very unsafe even for women channelers. So in addition to Bael Domon, I'm also hoping that we're going to see the character of Aeginin get introduced, because she's introduced in The Shadow Rising as a former Shan-Chan commander of a ship who is still hiding out in Tanchico now, and she ends up kind of joining the side of these Supergirls and teaming up with them, and ends up having a romance with Bael Domon, which is cute. So I would like to see that play out, or at least, see her introduced as a character. I'm also really hoping that we see Birgitte finally introduced as a character, because she appears to Perrin, Nynaeve, Elaine, and I want to say maybe Egwene too, all at different points throughout The Shadow Rising. And I know that not only does she appear, but Hopper appears to Perrin in the Wolf Dream, because along with the girls learning about how to navigate in the world of dreams, we also see Perrin learning more about the Wolf Dream and his wolf abilities, and that's tied in with the world of dreams. I'm curious how they're going to portray Hopper in the world of dreams, if he's going to be able to like talk to Perrin there, or like how wolf speak is going to work with that. So for some other like Tanchico relevant season 3 plot lines, we know that Jaheim Carradine has been cast, and he is a White Cloak commander who is in Tanchico to try to overthrow the unstable government there and install a puppet government, but instead he gets roped in by Liandrin to the Black Aja plotline. We know that one of the Black Aja who is with Liandrin in Tanchico has been cast, and that is Ispan. And there are also 3 other possible Aes Sedai who have been cast. One of them is Lelaine, who is the new sitter in the tower for the Blue Aja, and she is the fourth strongest Aes Sedai in existence, and will probably be replacing the former sitter for the Blue that was captured and killed at Falme last season. So it's interesting that we're establishing her character in season 3, and that makes me think even more that we will get the Tower Coup in season 3, if not at least get it introduced, because she ends up being one of the leaders of the rebel faction of Aes Sedai who split off from the Tower after Elaida takes over, and then even within the rebel Aes Sedai camp, we kind of have different factions who are vying for power and control, and one of those is Lelaine's. I'm also wondering if we're going to be seeing Egwene raised as Amyrlin as early as season 3, because they end up trying to raise her as the leader, Amyrlin, of the rebel Aes Sedai, in the hopes that she'll just be an inexperienced figurehead and scapegoat that they can puppet around and use as a mouthpiece. But instead, Egwene flips the script and girl bosses the shit out of all of them, and I'm here for it. This is why I stan her, and this is why people always give Egwene a lot of flack for like being on a high horse and being a know-it-all, but she has to act this way as part of the role that's been thrust upon her. I think it was also said that Mat might have been on set with Min in Tanchico, which makes me wonder if they will meet up in the tower perhaps and try to go to Tanchico to help the girls there. And like I said, if maybe he's not going to go to the Aiel Waste at all, since if we're eliminating the doorway ter'angreal, that's his only reason for being in Rhuidean. I'm also thinking that we're probably not going to get the Bowl of Winds plotline because it's too similar to the Hunt for the Black Aja and Tanchico storyline. I will be sad if we don't get to see at least a little bit of Ebodar because it's another interesting culture. I really like the character of Satal, so I'm gonna be sad if we don't see her. And I'm wondering if with the like abridged storyline that we're gonna have to get in the series, if that also means that we're gonna be getting rid of the concept of the kin and finding out about that. But in episode 3 of season 2, we did get fireworks in Cairhien, so does that mean that there is an Illuminators Guild and we will get Mat meeting Eludra at some point? But yeah, I know it's been said that Tom is confirmed to be returning for season 3, but I really hope we get more Bail Domon in season 3, because otherwise why the hell did you cast him? Now, I think it's also interesting that the majority of the Aiel plot is from Rand's point of view only, which leaves a lot of room for error and like misconceptions both on his part and other characters' parts, and a lot of room for the show to expand and elaborate and perhaps invent entire interactions for these characters that we're not seeing in Rand's POV chapters, or that are taking place off screen, between like Moraine, Egwene, and the Wise Ones in Avienda, Jason Natale / Asmodean, and like Lanfear or Couladin. Like there's a lot of room to expand on the plot just beyond things that Rand is seeing, because especially like I said, like Egwene's there getting training, but we don't really get any POV chapters from her, and like Rand's not concerned about her or what she's doing really. He's got his own problems to worry about. So I'm hoping that they take the chance to kind of expand upon Egwene's training with them a little bit more. I also think it's interesting that storytelling-wise in the novels, their entire journey across the Waste takes 12 days, and we only pick up with Rand and everyone arriving at the Cold Rocks Hold after he's given us a flashback and like summary of how that entire journey went. So that does give the show like some wiggle room even within the book plot to like speed up storylines and things. So I'm wondering if the show is going to do the same and like show not tell us some of what happened during that journey, or if we're just going to kind of gloss over a lot of that. Because a lot of it is just interactions that take place between him and like the Lanfear in disguise and Asmodean in disguise and the two dark friends that are working with them, which if we cut those two characters for simplicity's sake, we don't really need a lot of focus on those interactions. And I'm hoping that it's gives them time to spend more time with Rand, learning Aiel customs and those characters, especially because we do get a scene in The Shadow Rising where Rand finally gets more sword training with Lan. And since a lot of us were griping that we didn't get to see that play out in Faldara last season, and that Rand hasn't had any sword training now in the show so far, I'm really hoping they'll take the opportunity to take this other scene from the books and feature it in the show of Rand getting his sword training one-on-one with Lan and establishing that relationship between those two characters. So I know even the showrunners have been saying that the primary characters that they're going to be focusing on for season 3 are Rand's storyline in Rhuidean and Perrin's storyline with the Battle of the Two Rivers. Gwen does take a little bit of a back seat in this book, so it makes sense if we don't focus on her character as much in season 3. She's not really fitting into any of these main plot lines. Just kind of summarize this up now that this video is entirely too long. The main plots that we're focused on in The Shadow Rising are the Two Rivers from Perrin's point of view, which the show will be featuring this and probably, I'm assuming, wrapping up in one season with the Lord Luke character and the battle for the Two Rivers. Then we get Rhuidean, which is primarily from Rand and Matt's point of view, but if we're taking Matt out of the Waste and putting him in somewhere else, we might have room for some more of Egwene's and Aviendha's perspectives, and even Moraine and Lan's, because they're in their Waste too. We have Tanchico, which is mostly Elaine's POV, some Nynaeve POV. This is probably also going to be wrapped up within the season and culminate in the fight between Nynaeve and Moghedien. And then we have the Tower plot, which is Siuan and Min's point of view, which we will see Siuan brought down, stripped of the Amyrlin stole at the end of season 3. They might wait until season 4 to show their escape, because I think that would be a good draw to keep people hooked going into season 4, and then season 4 can focus more on Egwene and Aviendha's Wise One Dreamwalker training, and end with the Rebel Tower raising her as Amyrlin in her absence. But I also just saw an interesting video from Waddup where he predicted that perhaps they might go so far as to kill off Siuan's character entirely, and I have been wondering about this, because until the last battle, she doesn't really have that important of a role to play, aside from just kind of instructing Egwene in the ways of behaving outwardly like an Amyrlin to get respect from people. And I, for one, am not a fan of the Gareth Bryn romance plot between him and Siuan. I think it's stupid and sexist, and I hate that she just ends up like being a serving maid for him because of stupid plot reasons to keep them together for the rest of the novels, and especially with the way the show was taking her character, with really emphasizing the relationship between her and Moraine. I just don't know that she would hop straight from that into a heterosexual relationship with some dude that we haven't even met yet so far, and if we're even going to get Gareth Bryn as a character in the show. And then especially with like all of the issues they had with season 2, getting Siuan's actress on set for filming, and just with how much that conflicted, and like she wasn't able to be featured as much as they wanted. I don't know how much they're going to be able to keep her around for the rest of this show, and so it might be easier, and I kept wondering with like reading a lot of the scenes of Siuan's point of view in The Fires of Heaven, when it's her and Min and Leon on the run afterwards. There's a lot of focus more on Leon's character change and how she deals with the fallout of not having access to the One Power anymore, and how women cope with that. I think if we are able, for just ease of filming and just with the difficulty of having Siuan's actress around as much as they need her to, it just might be easier and more simplistic for the story's sake, and more impactful for the story's sake, if she ends up being killed in the Tower coup. And that might lead to a lot of conflict for Gowron's character, because he was very like anti-Siuan from day one, and remains anti-Siuan even after others prevent him with different facts to correct his misinformation. He still really has a grudge against her. So I wonder if like she was killed as a result of the Tower coup and he is backing Elaida, that would end up making him a little bit more of a sympathetic character, I think, than he ends up being in the novels. I will be curious and not really surprised if they do end up just killing off Siuan during the Tower coup and focus most of the character arc on Leon after that. Some other interesting things that I really am hoping get featured and I'm looking forward to in season 3 is the Nynaeve versus Moghedien fight. I mean, I think it's definitely like the top 10 best Wheel of Time moments for sure, and I'm so curious how they're going to portray it on the show, because it's just these women fighting with the one power, and so like to an untrained, non-channeling person just watching from an outside perspective, it might look like they're just standing there not doing anything. But in their minds they're just having this crazy epic battle. We also see concepts such as skimming introduced, which is very important. We see Rand bring water to the waste, which I think would be a very important and impactful scene to see happen. I'm also wondering, when I was going back reading this book again, why I remember the fight between Nynaeve and Moghedien way more and way better than the fight at the end between Rand and Asmodean. I don't know why, because like they're both equally impactful and important and like destructive to the environment around them, but for some reason I remember Nynaeve versus Moghedien as way more of an important and awesome fight than Rand versus Asmodean. Now, we do have Morghase's casting confirmed for next season, and so I'm wondering if that means Forsaken Robin is going to be one of the Forsaken in the show or not, because we know they're cutting the number down. So my prediction is still that in season 3, Elaida and Gawyn, at least, if not Galad, because he has to go off and do his White Cloaks thing. At the very least, Elaida and Gawyn are going to be sent to the tower to find Elaine, but Siuan is still deflecting about her whereabouts, and this will turn Gawyn against her. But I'm thinking that this show's need to both quickly introduce Gawyn as a character and have him go right into opposing Siuan and supporting Elaida means that Elaine most likely will not be returning to Tar Valon. She needs to stay missing for that conflict to happen. Mat is going with Rand, so he's not going back to the tower either. I don't know, like I said, if he's been on set elsewhere than Rhuidean, maybe he's not going straight with Rand. And Nynaeve originally ends up going back to the tower to overcome her block, but in the show, I think she's just going to decide to overcome her block on her own. Galad, I think, will probably not be sent to the tower, but will be sent to the White Cloak camp to see if they do have Elaine captive, as it's rumored, and will instead end up being recruited by them. And so he might be one of the White Cloaks that will find the girls in Tanchico during all of the chaos and conflict, but he's probably going to end up letting them go because somehow it's what's right or for the greater good. And that's kind of Galad's whole motivation. I think everything pre-chapter 22 that takes place in Tyr will be cut, so I'm curious to know how the Supergirls will learn of Liandrin and the Black Aja plot to bring them to Tanchico. I still think we're going to get the Caemlyn cold open that will at least introduce Morghase and perhaps introduce Ravine, but it's possible that the entire Andor succession plot will be cut because it's just too dense and lengthy and not important to the overall plot of the show. And I know that they also hinted that as early as season 3 we will already see the split of the Shaido group of Aiel as a force against Rand. And so I think we're going to see that plot line condensed and might see the battle outside Cairhien as early as season 3 or 4 so that we can wrap that up and focus on Perrin versus Masema. There's some other things that I wanted to point out that I took the time to make a note of. I kid you not, I actually went through each chapter and wrote down what character POVs we get in each chapter because I wanted to see who had the most time, like, on screen in this book. The Shadow Rising is Perrin's book by far, so I definitely would not be surprised if we spend a lot of time in season 3 focused on Perrin and Battle of the Two Rivers. Other than that, the most frequent characters that we see are Rand, followed by Elaine, and then we get a little bit of Mat. Almost all of Tanchico is from Elaine's point of view. We hardly get any from Nynaeve, and we don't get any Nynaeve POV until chapter 39 and 58. Only 4 chapters from Nynaeve's point of view. No Egwene POV after chapter 35. We also do get a rare Moraine POV chapter in the beginning of this novel. And then we get some from Min, 2 from Tom, and then like miscellaneous other, which is mostly like villain characters. So I'm thinking that perhaps months, everyone is going to go to Kyrian to fight the Shido, and then to Tyr in season 4 after Rand gets the Aiel behind him, because that Aiel do help him take the stone. But I wouldn't be surprised if we also get because I think they have hinted that we're going to get some of elements of the next book, The Fires of Heaven, in season 3. And I know there's been a lot of chatter online over the fact that Rosamund Pike, who plays Moiraine in the show, has left Prague, where the Wheel of Time has been filming this whole time. Like, she had a house there and has been living there the entire time they've been filming this show. And she recently divulged in an interview that she is selling that house and moving back to her home in the UK. So people are really worried what this means for the series as a whole, and whether or not we're not getting any more seasons after season 3, because we still don't have renewal for season 4 yet. People are also wondering if this means we're speeding up the timeline and we're going to have Moiraine be killed off as early as season 3. Because I think that would also be a big draw if we have both Moiraine and Siuan killed at the end of season 3. That will be a big draw to get people to come back for season 4 to see what happens. But yeah, like, that might hint that we will be seeing less of Moiraine in the show going forward. Curious to see how much plotline we're gonna get through in season 3. I know we're definitely gonna get Rand proclaimed Car'a'carn and go to Rhuidean, and then we'll probably see Couladin split off and take his group of Shido to form, like, the anti-Rand Shido League. So then that means we might get the battle between the Shido and Rand's forces led by Mat outside of Kyrian, to see Mat kind of stepping into that role. And it could also end with major climaxes being the Tower Coup, losing Siuan as a character, and a fight not only between Moghedien and Nynaeve, an epic fight between Rand and Asmodean, and another epic fight between Moiraine and Lanfear. Because while Rand is in Rhuidean fighting Asmodean, he's cut away from where everyone else is at Alcair Dal. All of the Aiel are meeting there to vote on if Rand is Car'a'carn or not. And so this big fight erupts there, but then he has to leave to go to Rhuidean and fight. We are going to go the route of see Moiraine fight Lanfear as early as season 3. They might tie it in as a feature of that separate fight, so that we'll have, like, Rand doing his epic one-on-one battle, and then, like, Moiraine being a more prominent main character in the show so far, and then Lanfear will show up there as well, and then we'll have to fight. Or maybe Lanfear and Asmodean will both be in Rhuidean, and, like, they'll all have to fight there. I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see what all plot elements we get from the Fires of Heaven in season 3. But this was just kind of my little deep dive breakdown into The Shadow Rising and what plot points I think we will see incorporated in the show and what we might skip or gloss over. I think that about wraps it up. I think this video has been long enough as it is. I could ramble way more about the Wheel of Time as always, but other than, like, having specific passages highlighted in the novel for, like, cool bits of dialogue or scenes that I think would be very awesome to see portrayed on screen, this was really all I had to talk about as far as, like, analysis and plot predictions goes. Let me know what you think about season 3 predictions. What do you think we will see versus won't see? Where do you think our characters are going to start off, and, like, how are they going to split off into their different ways? Do you think anyone will return to the White Tower, and if so, who? Just let me know what you think about the next season and what you would like to see. And until the next video, stay classy.